For many thousands of years, diamonds have been a symbol of the financial stability of the world, as well as items of unbelievable beauty, sought after by almost every woman in the world. In this program, Nicky Oppenheimer and Johnny Rue explore a brief history of the dynasty that is now the De Beers Diamond Company, and how the diamond trade survived the Second World War.
Chairman of De Beers, the greatest diamond mining and marketing company in the world.
White Waltham Place was really the mainstay of the international diamond trade.
Diamonds are romantic and exciting. The Cullinan diamond, the largest diamond ever found in the world by a factor of 3. And then he said with a twinkle in his eye, "But of course I did. It was the diamond." A few years ago, when the Queen Mother was, I suppose, 98 or 99, huge excitement to say that he'd found the other half. And he produced this piece, which was sadly made of glass.
I wonder how many people passing by at that time realized what a fortune there was lying at their feet with these diamonds. And so each girl was presented with cherries that he brought round in a big bowl for them. Glass was scattered all over the place, mingled with the diamonds. So it took ages and ages to separate one from the other.
And those of us who felt rough diamonds and moved them around get a special feeling. Just to position the Oppenheimers in the diamond business. The Oppenheimer family en masse left Germany in the 1880s and 1890s and came to England. And at that time, one of their relations on the female side was Mr. Dunkelsbühler, Anton Dunkelsbühler. And he owned a diamond company, a company that purchased diamonds in Kimberley. And his company was part of something that was splendidly called in those days the Syndicate. Now that has a wonderful sort of splendid ring to it, half good and half bad. And interestingly enough, if you're in De Beers today, if you go to Israel, it doesn't do you any good to say, "I come from De Beers." They look at you as though, you might be anybody. But you say, "I've come on behalf of the Syndicate," and then you get proper respect. But anyway, because of the family relationship, the Oppenheimer boys, as they were then, joined Dunkelsbühler and Company, and Louis in the early 90s and Ernest in the late 1890s. And they progressed to the point where Louis Oppenheimer became a partner in Dunkelsbühler in 1901. And my grandfather, Ernest, was sent in 1902 to be Dunkelsbühler's representative in South Africa to buy diamonds there produced by the De Beers mines. And he fell deeply in love with the diamond business, which is an easy thing to do. It's a very special business. And we have people here, like Johnny, who've been in the diamond business for a long time and will know the tremendous allure of the diamond business. And once he got himself established in Kimberley, I think the only thing he wanted to do in life was to become chairman of De Beers, the greatest diamond mining and marketing company in the world. And it took him some considerable length of time before he was able to achieve his ambition. But in due course, he was indeed able to become chairman of De Beers. And he did that at the worst of all possible times, which was just as the Great Depression started. But he saw that as a challenge. And one of the important things he wanted to do was to reorganize the syndicate. Up to then, it had been a collection of companies like Dunkelsbühler, all who worked together but were separate. And he wanted to bring this thing together and formed what was called the Diamond Trading Company. And this was the London selling arm of De Beers. And Louis, his eldest brother, was the natural and logical person to head up that organization. And you could say that that was finally put in place, was finally bedded down in the 1930s, when actually Dunkelsbühler and Company came to an end and was replaced by E. Oppenheimer and Son, but really the Diamond Trading Company became an integral part of De Beers. Now, obviously, diamonds are romantic and exciting. And we have here on this table some models of diamonds, which we hope you'll come out and look up later. They're some of the great diamonds that, particularly, funnily enough, have been produced by the Cullinan mine just outside Pretoria in South Africa. And that's an interesting mine because it's a mine that produces diamonds of very low value. The average price of the diamonds produced by Cullinan are really pretty low and miserable. But every now and again, it produces something unbelievable. And that seems to be the good Lord, making certain that nothing can be all good or all bad. But certainly at Premier, every now and again, something that startles and amazes the world is produced. And the first of those, most probably, was in 1907, and there it sits, the Cullinan diamond, the largest diamond ever found in the world by a factor of 3. And it's absolutely extraordinary when you think it's 3 times as big as the next largest diamond.
This great diamond is a more recent addition. The first star of Africa is even bigger and is in the scepter. Both of them are parts of an immense diamond which was found quite by chance by the manager of a mine in South Africa in 1905. Apparently, he just dug it out of the rock face with his walking stick. This is a model which shows you what it looked like. The whole Cullinan diamond, as it came to be known, was given to my great-grandfather, King Edward VII, on his birthday. The Dutch jeweller, who had to split it before it could be polished, was so overcome by the responsibility that he fainted as he struck the blow. But he did it perfectly. There are 2 smaller pieces which my grandmother always referred to as the chips.
And the second model there is another interesting diamond. That's the Yonker diamond. And below Premier, there was an alluvial flow and a stream, and people were digging, well, not really digging, just sort of panning for diamonds there. And Mr. Johannes Yonker panned for diamonds, and this huge, relatively huge diamond ended up in his pan. And it weighed 726 carats. And he looked at this in amazement. And he said, I've obviously got to sell this. But he would only deal with my grandfather in selling it. So he brought it to Johannesburg and took it to my grandfather's office, and they looked at it. And a deal was struck, I think, for £75,000, which was paid in cash. And the diamond business tended to be like that. Very sadly, my father told me some years later, or a long time later, that Mr. Yonker appeared with tremendous excitement. You will look, well, actually, if you look at the Cullinan diamond, actually the Premier diamond too, I mean the Cullinan diamond too, you'll see that one side of both those diamonds is a flat cleavage plane. And the theory is that where is the other half? And anyway, some years later, Mr. Yonker appeared on my grandfather's doorstep again in huge excitement to say that he'd found the other half. And he produced this piece, which was sadly made of glass. Found at roughly the time of De Beers' centenary, the centenary of the founding of De Beers, which was 599 carats of rough. And we at De Beers decided to have that polished to mark our centenary. And we had a weird and wonderful man working for us at the time that those of you in the diamond business would know, called Gabby Tolkowski. And he was a wonderful, special man. He had an amazing mop of hair which sort of stood out all over the place. And he was a Belgian. And he came, and we set up a special office in Johannesburg for him to polish this diamond. And he decided, well, before we came there, and he spent, I should think, 5 months looking at the diamond, just trying to think what to do with it. And the more he looked at it, he said, the more he simply was sucked into it. And he went home on one of these days, and he had big rings under his eyes, and he collapsed in the chair. And his wife said, "What's going on? Have you got a mistress?" To which Gabby said, "No, of course not." And then he said with a twinkle in his eye, "But of course I did. It was the diamond." And anyway, but Gabby decided that this diamond had to have pieces cleaved off it, as I said, with the Cullinan diamond. But it was the grain was not nearly as clearly defined as he wanted. So he decided that rather than cleaving it, he would have to actually scrape a hole, a line through the diamond. Gil, help again. What's that called?
Well, the groove.
Yeah.
It's the groove.
And you can only do that with another diamond. And so he had a wooden tool in which he attached what's called a sharp, a diamond with a sharp edge, and he scraped the centenary diamond. And he had a pair of golf gloves which he put on, and he scraped and he scraped and he scraped. And I don't know, it took him months to take a single piece off that diamond. And all I can tell you at the end of it, if you shook hands with him, you thought you'd been through the mangle. The diamond business, I think, is a very strange and special business. Strange and special to the point where I believe the miners, who after all are just moving dirt like any other miner anywhere in the world, but I actually believe diamond miners are unlike other miners. And I'm certain that has to do with the product they produce. And those of us who felt rough diamonds and moved them around get a special feeling for them. And it has something to do with the love and the emotion that is attached to that, the knowledge that you're actually going to get a rough diamond and from that going to release something of ultimate beauty. Means it's very different from being a coal miner. Of the royal visit to South Africa in 1947, which was just after the war, and it was said the King and Queen came there and it was like going to heaven because you'd left a country where there was rationing and life was desperately tough, and came to South Africa where we were untouched by the war and where there were eggs and butter and fresh cream in profusion. And on that trip they went to Kimberley. And if I can tell two stories about that trip. On the one thing, you will see there my sister, then I suppose 4, who was put up to go and present a box with a diamond in it to the two then princesses. And she was clearly given very careful instructions about what she had to do. She had to take this to the two princesses one at a time and curtsy to them and hand it over. And you see her in the picture there presenting this box to then Princess Elizabeth, now the Queen. And after she'd done that very satisfactorily, the King hove in sight, and Mary looked at him and he looked at her, and nothing happened. So he said to her, "Will you curtsy to me?" And obviously this was not in the instructions, so she said no. So he said to her, "Well, will you shake hands with me?" And after a deep thought, she said, "Okay." And actually, sadly, the picture's not there, but we have the picture at home of this tall man bending down and shaking hands with this little girl. And the other one I want to tell you is a story that is straight from the horse's mouth. A few years ago, when the Queen Mother was, I suppose, 98 or 99, Anthony Oppenheimer and I had the privilege of going to have lunch with her. And she was simply unbelievable. She was, you cannot imagine how in touch and connected she was. And she said, "You know, I had such a wonderful time in South Africa. I really loved it there." So that obviously made me feel good. So I said, "That's fantastic." And she said, "You know, your grandfather was unbelievably kind, and your sister presented my gals, as she called them, with diamonds, which was fantastic. But I have to tell you, something really embarrassing happened to me there." So I thought, "Oh, God, what's going on now?" She said, "You know, after they'd got their boxes with their diamonds from your sister, one of my gals," and she didn't reveal which one, said in a loud, clear voice to your grandfather, "Haven't you got anything for Mummy?" And he apparently went ashen white and rushed from the building and hurried back, clutching something which was sort of wrapped in a sort of scrunched up piece of paper, and sort of presented it to her. And she said, "And here it is." Now, I tell you, at 98, 99, that's pretty special, the history. We come to Waltham. As we say, the De Beers offices in London were bombed. And you'll see behind you here pictures of what it looked like after they'd been bombed. And they were bombed and burnt. And what happened there was, obviously in a diamond business, on every floor you have huge safes in which the diamonds are kept to protect them. And as the building burnt, the safes fell from floor to floor to floor into the basement. And the whole place burnt. And the interesting thing was, I was told that they got the safes open. And you'll see again over there a picture of what a diamond paper, there's a special way diamonds are kept where you put them in paper and you fold the paper in a special way. And they were all like that in the safes. And all those papers had burnt in the safes. But of course, diamonds were better than that. And there were just piles of diamonds sitting in the bottom of the safes. And obviously they had to find somewhere new to sort diamonds. And so what appeared to be a logical and safe place was here at Waltham. And so
This company, the Diamond Trading Company, they sold the diamonds at what we still call a site. The buyers would come to London from the main cutting centres. They would inspect a box of diamonds the company had prepared for them. And if they accepted the box, they would pay for them on the spot, and then the boxes would be sent to them wherever they came from. And this was the way the business was done, and it still is being done today, as far as I know. It said that the day war was declared, we were instructed to report to Maidenhead to White Waltham. Now, all a sorter needs, in those days, all a sorter needed was a pair of tweezers and a scoop. The tweezers, you picked up each individual diamond and examined it. The scoop, you scooped up the diamonds you'd sorted. You needed the tweezers, you needed the scoop, you needed a flat table and a north light. Now, Mr. Louis was very well known for his generosity and was a father figure to the staff here. There are many, many stories about his kindness, but one in particular was one of the young men working here who received his call-up papers. And when he was leaving, Mr. Louis said to him, "When you get leave, you must come and visit me. You will promise to do that." And the young man said, yes, he would. And on his first leave, he came back here, see Mr. Louis, who invited him to lunch. And at the lunch was Mr. Raymond and several other senior people, which quite overwhelmed the boy. But he managed to enjoy his lunch. And as he was leaving, Mr. Louis gave him a cheque for £20. Now, a soldier's pay in those days was 14 shillings a week, which today is about 70 pence. £20 today is quite a good tip. In those days, it was an awful lot of money. Awful lot of money. Now, all diamonds contain external flaws or inclusions. When you think they were formed 300 kilometers below the Earth's surface in a molten magma, you can understand why there must be some inclusions in them. And the thing a sorter has to do is to decide where these inclusions are, how big they are, and exactly what they are. And you get all sorts of things. You get black spots, you get feathers, you get bubbles, you get cracks. And it's the sorter's job to classify these diamonds so that these imperfections won't necessarily upset the cutter when he gets the diamonds.
see, I have a passion for diamonds, so anything to do with diamonds really gets me going. It's how the world has changed, but throughout that changing world and the changing generations, the diamond has remained the same, and it is forever.
Diamonds are forever. They are all I need to please me. They can stimulate and tease me. They won't leave in the night. I've no fear that they might desert me. Diamonds are forever. Hold one up and then caress it. Touch it, stroke it and undress it. I can see every part, nothing hides in the heart to hurt me. I don't need love, for what good is love? Diamonds never lie to me, for when love